This recording is published by Langogh, 2025. This recording is copyright. This is the IELTS listening test. You will hear a number of different recordings and you will have to answer questions on what you hear. There will be time for you to read the instructions and questions and you will have a chance to check your work. All the recordings will be played once only. You will hear a man or woman speaking to a group of people. You will be asked to answer questions based on the recording. You will have 30 seconds to read the questions before the recording begins. Now listen carefully and answer questions.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. As an environmental scientist who has spent over 15 years studying climate patterns and their impacts on communities worldwide, I'm here to discuss a critical topic that affects us all: climate change adaptation. While mitigation efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions remain absolutely essential, we must also acknowledge that certain climate changes are already occurring and will continue to affect us for decades to come. Therefore, adaptation strategies are no longer optional, they're imperative for our survival and prosperity. Let me begin by addressing one of the most visible impacts of climate change: rising sea levels and increased coastal flooding. Communities situated along coastlines face unprecedented challenges as ocean waters encroach upon their territories. Traditional static defenses like concrete seawalls are proving inadequate and environmentally damaging. Instead, many forward-thinking communities are investing in floating barriers. These innovative structures rise and fall with tidal movements, and can withstand the impact of storm surges more effectively than rigid alternatives. The Netherlands, for instance, has pioneered such systems, demonstrating that adaptation can be both effective and elegant. These floating barriers work in harmony with natural water movements rather than fighting against them, representing a paradigm shift in how we think about coastal protection. Moving inland, we encounter another pressing concern: the urban heat island effect, which climate change is dramatically intensifying. Cities are becoming dangerously hot, with temperatures often exceeding those of surrounding rural areas by several degrees. This phenomenon is particularly threatening to vulnerable populations, including the elderly and those with pre-existing health conditions. To combat this, urban planners are revolutionizing construction practices by incorporating heat-resistant materials into building designs. These materials include reflective roofing systems, sometimes called cool roofs, which bounce solar radiation back into the atmosphere rather than absorbing it. Additionally, advanced concrete mixtures with higher albedo values are being developed. These seemingly simple modifications can reduce building temperatures by up to 10 degrees Celsius, significantly decreasing energy consumption for cooling while making urban environments more livable. Water scarcity represents another dimension of climate change adaptation that demands immediate attention. As rainfall patterns become increasingly erratic and droughts more frequent and severe, communities must rethink their water management strategies entirely. One of the most promising solutions involves comprehensive rainwater harvesting systems. These aren't merely simple collection barrels. We're talking about sophisticated infrastructure that captures precipitation from rooftops, roads, and other surfaces, filters it appropriately, and stores it for later use. In regions of Australia experiencing prolonged dry spells, such systems have reduced municipal water demand by up to 40%. The technology ranges from household-level installations to community-wide networks that can sustain entire neighborhoods during drought periods. What's particularly encouraging is that these systems can be retrofitted into existing structures relatively easily, making them accessible to communities at various developmental stages. Now, let's turn our attention to agriculture, the sector perhaps most vulnerable to climate variability. Farmers worldwide are witnessing shifts in growing seasons, altered pest patterns, and increasing water stress on crops. Agricultural adaptation is multifaceted, but I'll highlight two critical approaches. First, the development of drought-resistant crop varieties through both traditional breeding and modern genetic techniques. Scientists are identifying genes that enable plants to thrive with minimal water, tolerate higher temperatures, and maintain productivity under stress conditions. Some of these varieties, already being deployed in semi-arid regions of Africa and South Asia, show yield improvements of 30 to 50% compared to conventional crops under drought conditions. This isn't about creating unnatural organisms, it's about accelerating nature's own adaptive processes to meet our accelerated climate challenges. Complementing these biological innovations, we have precision irrigation techniques that are transforming how we deliver water to crops. Gone are the days of flooding entire fields and hoping for the best. Modern precision irrigation uses soil moisture sensors, weather data, and sometimes even satellite imagery to determine exactly when and where water is needed. Drip irrigation systems deliver water directly to plant roots, minimizing evaporation and runoff. Some advanced systems even adjust water delivery in real time based on plant transpiration rates. Farmers adopting these technologies report water savings of 40 to 70% while often increasing yields simultaneously. The initial investment can be substantial, but the long-term benefits, both economic and environmental, are undeniable. Community preparedness forms another essential pillar of climate adaptation. As extreme weather events become more frequent and intense, early warning systems have evolved from luxury to necessity. Modern systems integrate meteorological data, hydrological monitoring, and predictive modeling to provide communities with actionable information hours or even days before disasters strike. These aren't just about issuing alerts, they're comprehensive frameworks that connect forecasting with response protocols. Bangladesh, frequently threatened by cyclones and flooding, has implemented such systems with remarkable success, reducing disaster-related fatalities by over 90% over the past 3 decades. The key lies not just in technology but in ensuring that warnings reach all community members through appropriate channels and in formats they can understand and act upon. Closely related to warning systems are community evacuation plans. Climate change increases the likelihood that populations will need to temporarily relocate to safer areas during extreme events. Effective evacuation planning involves identifying vulnerable zones, establishing evacuation routes, designating shelter locations, and conducting regular drills to ensure everyone knows their role. These plans must account for populations with special needs, including those with disabilities, the elderly, and families with young children. Successful implementation requires collaboration among government agencies, emergency services, community organizations, and residents themselves. Cities like Miami and Jakarta, facing recurrent flooding threats, have developed multi-layered evacuation strategies that can scale according to threat severity, from localized evacuations to citywide mobilizations. The effectiveness of any evacuation plan ultimately depends on the competence of emergency responders. Therefore, specialized training programs for emergency personnel represent a critical investment in community resilience. These programs go beyond traditional disaster response training to incorporate climate-specific scenarios, how to manage populations during prolonged heat waves, respond to compound disasters where multiple climate-related events occur simultaneously, and maintain operations when infrastructure fails. Medical responders need training in climate-related health issues, from heat stroke to vector-borne diseases expanding into new territories. Firefighters require preparation for wildfire seasons that now extend year-round in some regions. This comprehensive approach ensures that when disaster strikes, response teams can act swiftly and effectively, minimizing casualties and facilitating rapid recovery. Let me now address the economic dimension of climate adaptation. The transition to climate-resilient communities requires substantial financial resources, but viewing this solely as expenditure misses the broader picture. Smart adaptation investments generate economic returns through reduced disaster costs, increased productivity, and new business opportunities. Central to this economic transformation is investment in renewable technologies. Solar, wind, and other renewable energy sources not only reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also enhance energy security and resilience. Distributed renewable systems, such as rooftop solar panels with battery storage, ensure that communities maintain power during grid disruptions, which climate change is making more common. Moreover, the renewable energy sector creates employment opportunities, driving economic development while building climate resilience. Countries like Costa Rica and Scotland have demonstrated that rapid renewable energy transitions are both technically feasible and economically beneficial. Finally, financing adaptation at scale requires dedicated mechanisms, which brings us to climate adaptation funds. These are specialized financial instruments designed to support adaptation projects in vulnerable communities, particularly in developing nations that have contributed least to climate change but suffer its worst impacts. International funds like the Green Climate Fund and Adaptation Fund channel resources from developed to developing countries, supporting everything from infrastructure upgrades to agricultural transformation. At national and local levels, governments are establishing their own adaptation funds, often integrating climate risk into public budget planning. Some innovative approaches include catastrophe bonds, where investors provide capital that's released when specific climate triggers occur, and climate insurance schemes that help communities recover from disasters. These financial mechanisms aren't perfect, and much more funding is needed, but they represent growing recognition that adaptation requires dedicated, predictable, and substantial financial support. In conclusion, climate change adaptation encompasses a vast array of strategies spanning infrastructure, agriculture, community preparedness, and economic systems. The examples I've shared today, from floating barriers protecting coastlines to heat-resistant materials cooling our cities, from rainwater harvesting systems securing water supplies to drought-resistant crops feeding populations, from early warning systems saving lives to renewable technologies powering resilient communities, demonstrate that we have both the knowledge and tools to adapt. What we need now is the collective will to implement these solutions at the scale and speed that climate change demands. Adaptation is not about resigned acceptance of climate change. It's about active, intelligent response that protects our communities and creates opportunities for sustainable development. The communities that embrace adaptation today will be the resilient, prosperous societies of tomorrow. Thank you for your attention, and I welcome any questions you might have.
Visit langogh.com to view the answers to these questions or to access more tests.